Welcome back, everyone, once again to Inside the Pylon, a Midwest college football podcast, joined as always by Clinton Boring. My name is Ryan Satkoviak. You have reached the final of 4 episodes of our pre-recorded February series. Today we are talking about the coaching carousel and the 4 new head coaches in the Big Ten, the coordinators that they bring along with them, and then a couple of other coordinators throughout the conference to know here heading into the 2026 football season. Clinton, for the last time in February, sir, how are you today?
I'm hungry, man. I'm sitting here when we were doing the end of episode 3 and like, damn, those 2 bowls of soup did not last me very long. We had some great soup tonight. My wife made this type of Italian sausage noodle whatever soup the other night, and it is fantastic. And then she just made a standard chicken noodle soup. So we played outside, as I mentioned in the last episode, for about an hour plus. I was cold, so I said nothing better than some hot soup to warm my ass up. So I had hot soup, salad, and some butter bread with a little honey drizzled on it. Mr. Ryan, how are you?
I'm not a big soup guy. Soup does not fill me up.
I'm feeling that way at the moment. I mean, it's delicious. She does a great job. The ones that get really good is like hamburger stew, and you get like dumplings in them. That's a little more hearty. That's a little heartier.
Sam made a vegetarian tortilla soup. It had like quinoa in it. It was so damn good. This was a couple weeks ago. I ate two. I usually am not like when we have a shared dinner that's from like one pot, I usually am not like a go get seconds person. I had 2 bowls of this soup. It was very delicious.
I could use a little less on the seconds and just do first or halves.
Try not to.
No, it's the time of the year. I want
to
divulge and get as much soup as I can, because soup season doesn't last very long, because as soon as the temperature starts warming up, I'm on the grill, man. I'm not doing soup.
Don't think you have to worry about that not lasting too long. It has not gotten above freezing here in like 8 weeks.
It's been frigid here. I don't think
I'm pretty sure our first snowfall of the season is still on the ground. It's just buried beneath all the other snowfall at this point.
Yeah, it's the boys are pretty excited for. I mean, this time last week we were just wrapping up the snow, and it's pretty much all still here.
Yeah, you can see where my dog likes to shit in the backyard, because my tracks from the patio to where she poops are exactly the same each time. It's just a worn track and then an untouched yard.
Nice that your dog shits in one spot. Mine shits and walks while she's shitting, so.
Yeah, we've had that a couple of times. To wrap up our February pre-recorded episode series, we are talking the coaching carousel, which this is another one that we thought about doing kind of in late December, early January, when we had some dead period between games, because this was it was not a robust cycle in the Big Ten. We only had 4 jobs change over, which I mean, I guess is almost a 25% of the conference. So I guess that's kind of a lot, but it was a very robust cycle throughout the course of the sport. And that had far reaching ramifications on coordinator hires, but also on some of these hires as we were going through and following along with them. The big one being Penn State. Once they fired James Franklin midseason, everyone was sitting there thinking, oh, Penn State is open. That's the biggest job on the cycle. And then Florida came open, and then LSU came open. And it was a mess, to put it lightly, as everyone bent over backwards trying to get Lane Kiffin in the Southeast for some reason. But we're sticking to the head coaching changes in the Big Ten for this episode, and we'll mention some of the fascinating coordinator hire names to know at the end. But wanted to take this chronologically from the hires in which they were announced, which is going to start us off with Michigan State, Clinton. And the way that this came together made it feel like it was something that had been in the works for several weeks, with Michigan State firing Jonathan Smith the Saturday after they played the Friday game against Maryland, and then hiring Pat Fitzgerald, or announcing the Pat Fitzgerald hire on a Sunday the following day. Stuff does not come together that quickly unless it's in the works, but it was rumored after his settlement with Northwestern for wrongful termination had come to fruition that he was going to be a name to know on this coaching carousel. He was looking to get back into it, and he stays in the Big Ten with Michigan State. Looking at this hire, what is something... I don't like doing the grades, right? So we're not going to phrase this as we're going to grade this, because who knows if any of these are going to work. No one has a goddamn clue if any of these hires are going to work. 2 years ago, when Indiana hired Curt Cignetti, people were like, why are they hiring this guy from James Madison? And now people are asking, is this the guy the best coach in college football? So you never know how these are going to play out. So how we want to kind of hash this is, what's a thing or two that you like about this hire that you think can work well? for Michigan State? And what is a thing or two that gives you pause where you sit there and you look at it and say, not really sure about this?
I'm excited because Pat Fitzgerald brings consistency, and that feels like something that Michigan State really hasn't had since Mark D'Antonio left. He's a stabilizing presence. He's going to have to adapt to the new ways of portal and recruiting. But if you look at his overall record, 110 and 101, but he took Northwestern to the Big Ten championship twice, 2018 and 2020. Michigan State hasn't been there since 2015. They went twice and they won both. 2013 was the other year. The thing I don't like that makes me nervous is he's coming back into an entirely different college football world. I believe someone noted he's like 4 and something in the NIL era, but when he left, this is not what this was. It's a whole different ball game. He's going to have to find himself a good donor in NIL backing, which hopefully he will likely get.
Well, didn't they just get like a $400 million donation?
They did.
I don't know that it
They
was
did.
just specifically for NIL, but
But now
somebody
it's
is ponying up cash there.
team building and being able to keep players on your team and having a good roster year after year to be able to contend in this new Big Ten. So that's kind of my pause is, can he make that adjustment to the new style college football?
Yeah, I completely agree with your cause for pause looking at this situation with Pat Fitzgerald, because you can't coach the same way that you did 5 years ago. I mean, even 3 years ago when he was last in college football. And you see this every year when someone gets fired and everyone on message boards is like, bring back Urban Meyer. This dude would not survive coaching college football in this day and age the way that he coached college football back then, because you don't have that same put the fear of God into kids' power, because now they just call their agent and be like, okay, I'm going to fucking transfer and go somewhere else. Like you can't do that anymore. And that's not saying that Pat Fitzgerald is an old school guy who's going to MF you up and down the field. Maybe he is. I don't know. I've never been at one of his practices. But this is the way that you manage these egos now is different than it was in 2022 when this was first starting and before it really got to the point that it was. Or it is now. Another thing, Clinton, that gives me a little bit of pause about this hire is even before the way he got fired was just so weird, because it was a suspension and then nothing changed, but there was outcry that he was only suspended and not fired, and then they fired him, which led to the wrongful termination lawsuit, which led to his former players coming out saying this is being way overblown. Anyway, I digress on that, but they weren't really doing that great the last couple years under him, and he might have been like a year or two away from just getting fired at Northwestern for being bad at his job. Like they have the 7-2 season during COVID where they went to the Big 12 or the Big 10 title game. That was fantastic. The year before that, Clinton, they were 3-9. The year after that, they were 3-9. The last year of Pat Fitzgerald, they were 1-11. That's bad. That was not heading in the right direction. You know, David Braun comes in and immediately they are competent. Like was he Big Ten coach of the year in 2023, or am I making that up?
I believe he was, yes.
And they took a little bit of a step back 2 years ago in 2024. People are like, okay, is this guy's not Pat Fitzgerald. And they come back and they're a bowl team again this year. So it's not like when you win at a program like Northwestern, or in the past when you'd win at a program like Vanderbilt, people look at you like, wow, you are so good. No one else on planet Earth could possibly do what you're doing because you're the only person who's ever done this. And then when someone else comes in and does the same thing, it kind of breaks that facade a little bit. David Braun came in and basically was continuing what Pat Fitzgerald did. Are we sure that he was that good of a coach relative to expectations? So that gives me a little bit of a pause too. What I do like about this hire is he seems to have surrounded himself with good people at the program. We talked about it a little bit, or mentioned it in passing on the last episode. He retained Joe Rossi as his defensive coordinator. Good reputation, even though their defense was not particularly great last year. I think that might have been an injury thing more than anything, but they bring in Max Bula as co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach. He's done a great job as a linebackers coach in his 2 years at Notre Dame. I don't remember when the interview occurred, or I think it was on Bussin' with the Boys. They were talking with Mike Vrabel. It might have been the year right after he got fired by the Titans or before. I don't remember when it was. But they were asking him, who was the smartest player you've ever coached? And he, without thinking about it, said Max Bula. And he said this was a guy who played one position. He could have played 8 and he didn't even have to rep at it because he just knew what to do. This is a guy with an incredible football mind. And it really feels like they've brought him in as the heir apparent to Joe Rossi whenever he feels like retiring. A Spartan player. I think he was on their Big Ten title team, the team that got stomped in the playoff. He actually might have gotten suspended for a Rose Bowl for a steroid suspension, I think. Maybe. I should probably fact check that. Anyway, that's not important. He is a great football mind, and I think he's going to bring a lot to that defense, and they need an attitude adjustment on that defense. So other than when they play Notre Dame, I'll be rooting for him because he's been an easy guy to root for. So I don't know the likelihood that this works out. I could be wrong. Maybe a couple of years off has been good for Pat Fitzgerald. He's been able to do some soul searching and figure out how to win in this era of college football. As far as the 4 hires that have happened in the Big Ten this cycle, I do think this is probably the riskiest.
I don't know. I'll tell you who I think my riskiest might be.
Okay.
And when we get to him.
That's fair. He also brings Nick Sheridan, Alabama quarterback coach, with him. I do have a little bit of pause for that because he wasn't the play caller this past year. And I can't remember if he was the year Ryan Grubb was not there, but that Alabama offense was also not very.
Yeah, but Michigan State's not Bama. They're not held to the Bama standard.
That's true. And he also
there's a little less stress on him.
He also doesn't have Jalen Milroe playing quarterback for him. So that probably helps too.
Certainly.
So that'll be an interesting one to watch this season. Next, we'll talk UCLA with Bob Chesney, a Conference USA champion. He took over the JMU program that Curt Cignetti had helped build up and transition to Division I and did not miss a beat. He was at Holy Cross prior to that. Now with the Bruins, with a playoff appearance on his resume, Clinton, he brings both his offensive coordinator, Dean Kennedy, and his defensive coordinator, Colin Hitchler, with him. Have to put a little emphasis on that there. What do you like about Bob Chesney at UCLA? What gives you pause with Bob Chesney at UCLA?
Well, this was the hire that gave me the most pause, honestly. And part of it is so many people, because he's directly from JMU and bringing a lot of JMU talent with him, are going to think it's Cignetti 2.0. And that gives me cause for pause. Those things sometimes are lightning in a bottle to have that type of success. Cignetti is a different breed. These guys don't have the same path. Chesney does have 25 years of college coaching, 16 as a head coach. He's 132-51. But if UCLA fans are going to sit here and expect a Cignetti effect right away, then they're going to feel like this hire doesn't exceed expectations. It's not going to meet their expectations. They're pretty low in terms of star talent outside of Nico. Again, this is without bringing in, I know, the JMU talent. The Big Ten is a rugged conference, man, and you're trying to take a team who's finished near the bottom the past 2 seasons and give them these potential expectations. I'm a little bit nervous about that. The other thing that gives me cause for pause is he's walking in here with another stout schedule. They open at Cal. They have to go to Michigan. They have to go to Oregon. They have to go to Minnesota. They have to go to Illinois. They get Illinois, USC, Michigan State, and Washington at home. They do avoid OSU, Penn State, Indiana, but I would assume not Washington, Wisconsin, and Michigan State are expected to be much improved this year compared to their 2025 selves. I'm not saying they're going to be top of the Big Ten, but they're going to be an improvement. And when you're UCLA and you sit near the bottom, you had 10 sacks last year. Those are some big, lofty expectations. What he does bring with him and that I like is a winning mentality. As I said, 132-51 in his 16 seasons as a head coach. I think that's huge for a program like UCLA who has been pining for some football success for years. So I'm excited. He gets to keep Nico. That's a huge key piece for this. He's getting to keep a star quarterback. He's putting pieces around him. Who knows, Ryan? Maybe the Cignetti tree is the way to go. Maybe the Cignetti route's the way to go. Maybe Chesney is Cignetti 2.0. I don't know. Your thoughts?
Well, he's certainly not doing anything to put those comparisons to bed. Did you see what he did at their last basketball game? He went on the court and said, we're about to win a Big Ten championship. So he's doing the Cignetti.
USC sucks. Penn State sucks. Ohio State sucks.
He didn't go that far, but he's doing the let's go on the basketball court and talk some silly nonsense and try to speak it into existence.
Can you imagine what the Big Ten fan base is going to do if it's UCLA versus Indiana in the Big Ten championship next year?
It'd be pretty funny. It would be pretty funny. What I do like about Bob Chesney is you kind of touched on it, the winning pedigree at multiple stops. He has been, I don't know if I would say a program builder, how long you have to be at a place to be consistently referred to as a program builder, but he's qualified for the playoffs, both in Division II with Assumption College and in the FCS with Holy Cross. I think he made the playoffs in 4 of his 5 seasons at Holy Cross. So this is a guy who has won a lot of football at lower levels. And then again, we saw what he was able to do with James Madison this year, qualifying for the college football playoff, which is no small feat in and of its own right. The The other thing that I do like before we'll get to the cause for pause is they are investing in this program, which I think if you'd ask UCLA fans, the issue has been commitment from the university. I saw in an article today that between Chesney and his assistants, they're making $17.4 million for this next football season. I don't know where that would fall in the Big Ten, but that is a lot of money. So good for them for ponying up a little bit to support that football program. Something I don't like, and you kind of hit the nail on the head with the Cignetti comparisons, I feel like that's setting him up to fail. You're now holding this guy to the standards of his predecessor at his previous school who went to a completely different situation. This is not an apples to apples comparison. It's not fair to him to make that comparison. And part of the reason why I have a little bit of pause about that too is Curt Cignetti had something in his background that Bob Chesney does not, and that's being a position coach under Nick Saban. He had an opportunity to learn how to run or observe at least how Nick Saban ran a program. And going through Bob Chesney's career, he doesn't have that high level assistant experience at a P4 program. Like that's not something that he has done before. He's not seen how it's done. And we've talked about this on the show in the past multiple times, how there seems to be this shift away from hiring or there was at least a shift away from hiring the G5 head coach in favor of a P4 coordinator, because they have that more hands-on experience running, maybe not running, but seeing how a program of that magnitude is run and the finances that go into it and how to manage that. That just doesn't happen at the G5. And I get JMU is a higher level G5 program, which is crazy to say considering how few years they've actually been at the FBS level, but you don't get that same kind of experience, and it's just not something that he's had to do before. So, and I get to, I don't remember who you were talking to, I guess it was with Sammy a couple weeks ago when we were talking about, at the lower levels, you're the coach, you have to do everything. Maybe that helps a little bit with this, but, part of why Cignetti is the way he is, you can argue, is because of that association he has with Nick Saban. And that's just not something that Bob Chesney has. So holding it with that same standard, Clinton, I think that's setting him up for failure.
It's a tall task, man. He just took the most losing program in college football history to a national championship. That's a hell of a thing to try to mimic and live up to. So I'm excited for UCLA. I think the hire is great, and I want to see UCLA be good. I mean, if anything, if we could get this USC-UCLA rivalry to mean something this year, that would be a lot of fun for college football.
USC needs it because they're shitting on all their other rivalries because they just want to make the playoff. They're still not going to make the playoff. Up next, Clinton, one of the longest winding head coach searches of the cycle. Matt Campbell going from Iowa State.
Wait, has it ended yet? No.
Going from Iowa State to Penn State. I got to ask you, I've been thinking about this one a lot. If this search played out differently, where Penn State targeted Matt Campbell right off the bat and hired him immediately, do you think the fan reaction would have been different if that appeared to be choice number one all along versus how it actually appeared, where they swung and missed on everyone, got everyone seemingly in the sport a raise? It looked like a 5-bell dumpster fire, and then they managed to pivot and hire a competent head coach.
I think the fan base would have been less satisfied with it if they'd have done it early.
That's because that was my thought too, is like, people and this is not saying that Matt Campbell is a bad coach. He's not a bad coach.
Not at all.
But there was so much bluster about hiring a big name and big game swinging. And that's just not.
No.
Matt Campbell's not who you think of when you think of that. And if
maybe a few years ago.
Oh, for sure. Then, there's that interesting school of thought that I think we've talked about I keep referencing past shows that may or may not have happened, where it felt like Matt Campbell missed his opportunity to strike while the iron was hot, kind of like right off that Brock Purdy era, when I think they lost to Oklahoma in the Big 12 title game, and they were a really good team. Granted, they did make the Big 12 title game 2 seasons ago and almost make the college football playoff. But it really felt like Matt Campbell was destined to take one of these jobs in the early 20s, and then he didn't, and then they had a down year, and it felt like the time had kind of passed him by. But the pendulum swung back in his favor here for this one.
I mean, it feels like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, yet you're expecting a different result here. Matt Campbell is listed as my most uninteresting hire, and that's not to knock him at all for the Penn State fans who decide to tune into this. I think Matt Campbell's a really good coach. I think he's a really nice, safe fit for Penn State. but you had to go safe because you couldn't get anything else. And he feels very similar to James Franklin. And you're saying Clinton. No, he's not. Well, guys, I'm going to give you some stats here. Matt Campbell, 16 and 27 against top 25 opponents, while James Franklin was 15 and 28. Matt Campbell, 4 and 6 versus the top 10, while Franklin is 4 and 21. Now I get it. That's a better record. However, Franklin had more opportunities because he's in a tougher conference with the Big Ten, playing the likes of Michigan and Ohio State every year. Do we think Penn State actually got better with this hire? And Ryan went back and said, what if they'd have done it right away? Well, you guys were all criticizing Matt Rule's record versus ranked opponents when it was rumored that he was going to come back and coach at Penn State. Yet you're not batting an eye at Campbell's now? Is this a thing that is where Campbell does more with less than what Franklin did? We already talked about this in our show last week, but he brought over 24 Iowa State transfers. So Penn State just feels like Iowa State East now. One thing that I do like about this hire, which would have been the case for anybody, but especially for a veteran head coach who's bringing in veteran players, is that year one schedule for Penn State. I think the toughest game is they go to Michigan. And that's it. They should be able to manage the schedule safely. I believe USC comes to Happy Valley, and maybe we'll get lucky and that's a night game. That'd be pretty sweet. But you get a veteran head coach, which is great. So you didn't have to swing for something that maybe was an unknown. I know Bob Chesney, people were throwing his name out there as well. So the thing I like, veteran head coach, things, plural, I like veteran head coach, bring in a veteran team, ton of transfers with him. And then the hiring of D'Anton Lynn, I think was huge, poaching him away from USC to help run this defense. Again, D'Anton Lynn, a PSU alum. That'll be great. But a ton gives me cause for pause, and it makes it the uninteresting hire because it just feels like James Franklin again, in my opinion.
So I will push back a little bit on the top 25 thing, and this is I'm going to talk myself into like a circular logic here that may not make sense, but I'm going to try to make it make sense because I think whenever you get a situation like this where you have a successful head coach who's at a program that doesn't historically fund its football operation the same way that the big boys do or is coming from a lower tier conference, the inclination is to say, well, if Matt Campbell can do that at Iowa State, just imagine what he can do at Penn State with the Penn State resources, as if you were airdropping Penn State into the Big 12 and then having Penn State's resources play a Big 12 schedule. Yes, he has more resources to work with at Penn State than he does Iowa State. I'm sure that is going to be nice for him to experience, but the level of difficulty also increases, Clint. You're not playing fucking West Virginia and Cincinnati anymore. You got Michigan, Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon. You're going to have to compete against teams in the SEC for recruits now. You were not having to do that at Iowa State. You were not getting into these big time recruiting battles for blue chip prospects. These are new waters for him. And while yes, he is going to be coaching with more in his war chest supporting him, he's also going to be trying to catch bigger fish than he was in the past. So it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment for that. And I think he's well equipped for it. But again, you can't just sit there and say, oh, well, he did this at Iowa State with those resources. Imagine what he's going to do at Penn State with these resources. Well, yes, but also the level of difficulty. He was just playing it on varsity mode, and now he's playing it on Heisman mode. The level of difficulty goes up a little bit there. However, where I do think you can make a little bit of an inference is with that top 25 record. And that's where I think it's a little unfair to compare him to James Franklin, because facing against top 25 teams at Iowa State is going to be distinctly different than facing top 25 teams at Penn State. Because again, if you're Penn State, you fancy yourself being an above replacement level top 25 team, right? You're not sitting there saying, well, we're like that team that shows up in the top 25, 5 times a season and then loses and always on the fringe. You fancy yourself as a team that's consistently in the top 15. So now he's at an opportunity where he is going to be the coach of a perennial top 15 team, should be a perennial top 15 team, at least from a resources standpoint. You're going to have a little bit of an advantage over your replacement level top 25 team than you would have at Iowa State. And, he got some good teams there. I think he's 4-6 all time against top 10 teams, which is ironically more than James Franklin has done in his career, or one less. What was he, 5-20? I don't remember.
Franklin, I just said it, 4-6, 4-21.
So he has the same number of top 10 wins in half the opportunities. So there's something to hang your hat on there. Something that does give me cause for pause with him, though, Clinton, is he's never won a conference title. He never even played for one in the MAC, despite being highly successful at Toledo. Every year they tied for first in the West, he lost the tiebreaker, which I must have memory hold that era of MAC football out of my brain, because I could have swore that there was one in there somewhere. But he never played for a MAC title at Toledo. And I get it's Iowa State. You're not expected to compete for Big 12 titles, but he played for two and he lost both. So it's a guy who's never won a conference title in his coaching career. And now you're putting him at a job where the last guy was fired because he couldn't win conference titles and national titles. And that's what you've basically set as the standard by firing him. And I get more of it is at play than just, it's not that simple. There was probably some other stuff going into that too. But that's, I don't know, man. He's a guy who's done well, but he's never shown that he could get his previous stop over the hump. Maybe that changes here. I'm sure that now that we're talking down on it a little bit, it will, and they're going to win the Big Ten this year. But he's a really good head coach. I like the D'Anton Lynn defensive coordinator hire. I do wonder a little bit about just recruiting philosophy and the personnel shift. You're going from a 3-3-5 defense that you've run for the eternity of the time you were at Iowa State to now not that with D'Anton Lynn. So that's going to be a little bit of a curveball. But I think the biggest question I have about Matt Campbell at Penn State is how does he step up to those big recruiting battles? That's not something he's had to do. And if you want to win in the Big Ten, you have to bring in the talent, whether it's through the portal or through high school recruiting. But you're going to have to be going against the best teams in the country to get that talent. And how does he adapt and do that?
You know who has won conference championships at his last stop, Ryan? The final coach of our coaching carousel in the Big Ten, Kyle Whittingham. Two Pac-12 championships, 2021, 2022. Now, head coach of the Michigan Wolverines. Right as Ryan takes a sip of water, I end my phrase.
He's a guy who has been coaching at one school and is now somehow coaching in his fourth conference. That's crazy.
It's crazy how
when you think about
beautiful sport that we love has changed so much. So much.
So this is an incredibly fascinating hire, and this is honestly, he won't come on the show and say it because I won't ask him to come on the show and say it, but one of my coworkers is a big Michigan fan, and when this was all breaking, I said to him, I'm like, I know that they want to hire in theory, the fans want the big up and coming coach because you want someone who's going to be there for a decade and yada, yada, yada. But the Michigan athletic department is in such disarray right now. That guy was not coming, and maybe Kenny Dillingham was coming, but for whatever reason, they didn't want him and didn't offer him the job. Whittingham is the perfect guy to come into this situation. A real adult in the room who can block out the noise, whatever nonsense is going on in the athletic department, and lock in on the football program and say, we are running an adult operation here. And whatever happens outside with the athletic director, with the president, whatever, we're not going to deal with it. So whether Ward Manuel ends up being the athletic director for the entire time Kyle Whittingham is here, or they fire Ward Manuel and they hire an athletic director who doesn't suck. If you inherit Kyle Whittingham as your football coach, you're generally, I think, going to be pretty good with that. So I don't think he's going to have to worry whatever happens in a hypothetical change at athletic director. But either way, this is the situation I think that benefits Michigan the most is you bring the guy in, let him do his 5 years to get the rest of the coaching out of his system. And then you do what they tried to do at Utah and have a head coach in waiting. So then when there's more stability in your program, maybe it's Jay Hill, the defensive coordinator who he brings over from BYU. Maybe it's Jason Beck, the offensive coordinator who follows him from Utah. Maybe it's one of those guys. Maybe you're at a point then where you're saying, all right, well, we're just going to go out and hire the next up-and-coming coach. But he's a perfect transition coach for this era of Michigan football. And I think he's a guy who's going to be capable of making them a contender for the Big Ten in his first year here.
I really like the hire for Michigan. As Ryan already said, it's to come in, balance this program out, get them back on their feet where they need to be. He sits with a 177-88 overall record for his career. That's a 60.668 winning percentage, bowl record of 11-6. As I mentioned, he has 2 conference titles, 2021, 2022, and undefeated in 2008. That seems like an eternity ago. They were 13-0 and Sugar Bowl champions. He has 10 plus wins in 8 seasons and 17 winning seasons out of 20 full seasons as a head coach. They won the 2009 Sugar Bowl against Bama. We already mentioned the back-to-back Pac-12 titles. But here's what Michigan fans will like. He finished 11-6 in rivalry games against BYU. So again, in addition to him balancing everything out, he's already brought more coaching stability. You got Bryce Underwood, a quarterback coach. About damn time. If you want your 5-star, $12 million quarterback to develop into someone who's deadly in the Big Ten, probably should have him have a quarterback coach.
Yes.
He likes the style of ball that Michigan runs. He runs the ball, he utilizes tight ends, and he plays defense. What is something that USC, especially under Lincoln Riley, had trouble with Kyle Whittingham, Ryan? Physicality. Kyle Whittingham brings physicality on his teams. You don't really know of many quarterbacks he's ever put in the NFL. Probably not wide receivers either. Some tight ends.
He got Tyler Huntley.
Yeah, it's there. He's got a bigger war chest now with Michigan. You mentioned the AD, president, all that stuff is in kind of disarray right now, but you have one stabilizing thing, and that's Kyle Whittingham. I think that's the huge, huge plus for this. The minus is, and we talked about this, when I watched that introductory press conference and he's like, well, I guess I have to hate Ohio State now. It's just like, that did not feel like juicy hatred. And again, you can always develop it. I get it. But deep down at the root of his core right now, he does not hate Ohio State. And maybe he doesn't ever. Maybe he views it as a rivalry game and I want to win it, but I'm here for 5 years and who gives a shit? I'm not Michigan born and bred. It matters to me. It's whatever all the Ohio State fans have said about Ryan Day. We know it matters to you, but does it really matter to you? And if he goes out and he swings 0-2 and 0-3 in his first couple years, we're going to be hearing about it, just like we did with Ryan Day. Is Whittingham past his prime of winning big games? He coached in the Big 12 and the Pac-12, Ryan. He has not coached in the Big 10. So we just said this about Matt Campbell, how much of a difference this conference is to those other two conferences. It's physical. There's elite players everywhere. How does he recruit? He's going to have to recruit against, you said it, the SEC, in addition to the big boys of the Big Ten with Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State, Oregon, USC. If Pat Fitzgerald gets Michigan State moving in the right way at all, you're going to have to compete against all those guys. It's a little bit different than what you dealt with in your previous stops. So that gives me a little bit of cause for pause. But this is an exciting hire for Michigan. It's about what you could ask for with everything from the fallout of Sharon Moore and that entire athletic department at this point. Very solid hire for Michigan. I'm excited to see where this goes.
I'm going to contradict myself, and I'm freely willing to admit that, because I'm going to say that my concern with Kyle Whittingham is he is quite literally a West Coast of the United States person. Aside from one season when he played for the New Orleans Breakers of the USFL, his entire life, Clinton, has been west of the Rocky Mountains. He played at BYU for 4 years. Played for a year for the Denver Broncos, a year for the Denver Gold, a year for the New Orleans Breakers. Then he went back to BYU as a GA for 2 seasons. He had a cup of coffee with the Los Angeles Rams. Then he went back into coaching. Eastern Utah as their defensive coordinator for a year. Idaho State, special teams coordinator and linebackers for 3 years. Then he was Idaho State's defensive coordinator for 2 years. Then he got hired to be Utah's defensive line coach in 1994, Clinton. He has been at Utah as a coach since 1994. I was 3. This dude has been coaching at Utah for almost my entire life. He is Utah. This man is Utah. He's never coached out here. He's only been out here for a season. And even then, that was in the South. So it's just, you talk about style of football, and he plays this physical style of football. So I think he's going to acclimate well. I think the culture shock of possibly recruiting in the Big Ten might be a little goofy at first, but he's surrounded himself with good assistants, some who know the area as well, so I think that will help. Why I like this hire, aside from the reasons I already mentioned why I like this hire, is this is a guy who quite literally made Utah football into what it is. He took them when he... A lot of people forget this, again, because it was 20 years ago, which might as well be in the Stone Age for college football terms. When he took over Utah from Urban Meyer, they were a G5 team. He won a BCS bowl game as a G5 team. I think they beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl that year.
Was it Georgia or was it Bama?
Well, it was one of those two. It might have been Bama. It was one of those two teams. In 2008, they went 13-0 and they won the Sugar Bowl. They finished number 2 in the AP poll. Again, as a Mountain West football team. He helped them transition from the Pac-12, and it wasn't pretty at first. 8-5 his first year, then a pair of 5-7 seasons. Then 9-4, and in his 5th year, they were 10-3, and they were playing in the Pac-12 title game. He made 2 other Pac-12 title game appearances before winning 2 consecutive Pac-12 titles in 2021 and 2022. And then he helped Utah transition from the Pac-12 into the Big 12. Again, first year was not great, 5-7. That was a lot of quarterback limbo when they were pretty much handcuffed by Cam Rising, trying to figure out what the hell he was going to do with his future. But they really, really rebounded well this year, Clinton. 10-2. They were on the cusp of making the playoffs, and a big reason why was offensive coordinator Jason Beck, who brought Devin Dampier with him from New Mexico, and he is following him to Michigan. I don't know that, Bryce Underwood's definitely not the same body type as Devin Dampier because Bryce Underwood is a fucking massive human being, but he's very athletic. I don't know if the best use of him is running him like they ran Devin Dampier. Again, he got hurt midseason, and that was part of why they got the shit kicked out of them by Texas Tech is he was not playing quarterback for them. I am really fascinated to see what this offense does this year with Jason Beck. Like, I think it could go one of 2 directions. He's either going to be electric and fun to watch, or he's going to get Bryce Underwood killed, and they're going to be awful. But I love the Jay Hill hire too. 2 really good coordinators here. And again, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. If Michigan can go 9-3 when their coach was DMing OnlyFans at the models at the halftime of the Ohio State game, what are they going to do when they have a real coach at the helm? I think there's
The
a lot
last time they had a real coach at the helm, they won a national championship.
That's true. Never mind the circumstances it took for them to get there. I do like this hire, though. I wonder how long he wants to be there. And I mean, you talk about the hatred that he does not have for Ohio State. I think he has a hatred for how he got done over at Utah. And I think he's coming out, at least this year, with a chip on his shoulder with something to prove. So this is going to be a really fascinating team to watch this year. I think there's a lot of talent on hand. If they can figure out the receiver position, and it just blows my mind they didn't have a fucking quarterback coach for Bryce Underwood. Like, you just watched him play, and my disclaimer that I've said before is I'm not a quarterback guy. I'm not going to sit here and be like, X's and O's this, mechanics that. But like, you watch this dude throw, to the naked eye, you can see there's something funky with his mechanics. Maybe they should correct that. Oh, they don't have a quarterbacks coach. Oh, why don't they have a quarterbacks coach? Now that they have a quarterbacks coach, I think that there's a world of potential that's just dying to be unlocked with him.
I agree. And I think that's part of the reason Whittingham, even being an older coach, when we know I'm sure LSU and other schools were pining to throw money at him, Whittingham was able to be the stabilizing presence and say, hey, look, this is what I can bring you. This is what we did with Devin last year. We're not going to do maybe the same thing, but we can develop you and get you better. And that's a huge piece for Bryce Underwood, who I assume wants to be drafted into the NFL someday, because what kid doesn't when they're that highly touted?
Also, Devin Dampier, 5'11", 204 pounds. He is much smaller than Bryce
Very
Underwood.
different. Yeah, I agree with you, though. If Beck's going to go out here and try to run him around all the time, you're going to get him killed.
Yes. Devin Dampier last year had 146 rush attempts for 835 yards and 10 touchdowns. I would be shocked if that was the case this year, but a lot of the comps for Bryce Underwood coming out of high school were Cam Newton. And his one season at Auburn, he ran 264 times for almost 1,500 yards and 20 touchdowns. So I don't know that I would run my quarterback 300 times, but maybe they do. Maybe they give him 150 rushes, and that certainly would add an interesting wrinkle to this Michigan offense, which should be better this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Super intriguing hire. I'm excited to see how it pans out.
Well, we will talk about Michigan again in the coming weeks. When you hear us live, when you hear us next, we will be live. Are we going to be
March 2nd?
Are we going to be spring previewing, doing spring
We're going to
games?
jump right into the spring previews right away this year, guys. So that way we have a little more time on the back end between end of spring previews and start of fall previews. In the past, we started on April 1st 2 years ago, so we were already a little bit behind the 8 ball. But last year we did the month of March, mostly just top 10 QBs, top coaches on the hot seat, yada, yada. And then we went into the spring previews, and we did better with last year's. We wrapped up early May versus first year when we wrapped up almost late May.
Yeah, it was almost June.
So we want to give you guys more time in between. And again, Ryan and I working behind the scenes. Ryan's got a good idea of how to do our spring previews this year, so they're not 45-minute episodes, maybe 15 minutes or so a team, quick, concise, these factors that we're looking at, give you a little taste, and then we get the big stuff when we come into fall previews. But yeah, early March, we're going to jump right into them. We're going to get them done, and then we'll go back to, I think last year we did once a week for a fair amount. I think it was for the month of June, but we'll go once a week again for a while and build up to that big run of fall previews.
It
Looking
might be,
forward to it.
well, depending on when we finish with the spring, it might be May and June this year,
Yeah.
which would be
Yeah.
nice. Would be nice.
Yes. A little break before we ramp up to the heavy stuff.
Yeah, 5 times a week in fucking July again. Thank you for humoring us with these pre-recorded episodes. We'll be back with you guys live next week, and it's March, and hopefully there's no more snow on the ground, but probably not. Okay, thanks. Bye.
See you guys.